Thank you for everyone joining, and especially for the people that are online joining too. So starting off with building data science teams, and want to walk you through some of the philosophies and things that I've found as I've gone around and talked to different people about how they've built teams, as well as a lot of the lessons learned that we did at LinkedIn as well. So starting off, what is data science? Don't have to tell you too much about that here, but I think it's an important question that we need to be continually asking ourselves. And I think the biggest thing about data science for me personally is that rather than talking about data science as a definition, but it's about what are those organizations. Those organizations that I think of when I think about data science are those ones that acquire data, they process data, they leverage data in a timely fashion, and they really use it to create efficiencies and iterations to develop both the new products and then more particularly navigate the competitive landscape. And you've heard a lot of those themes today. And to kind of go into that, one of the things that I think is useful is to recognize the speed at which we can do analytics nowadays and how fast that's happening. And one of the things is just highlight that is this graph here. And you can tell by the age of the audience, is that Star Trek, or is that a commercial for figuring out something about travel? And so you always know that is. But this case, we're talking about the Star Trek and the famous scene of Khan, and how many A's are in there. And this is one of my favorite interview questions. They say, hey, just write a quick script and tell me what the distribution of the number of A's that are out there. And so very quickly, you can get that distribution, and it's kind of a little quick thing, but think about how hard this was to do 5, 10 years ago. You'd say, okay, now we need to go get all this data in, and then we're going to start create some ETL process, and then we got to create this data schema, and then finally we need to, where are we going to put it, and then we're going to need to get some SQL tier on top of it, and then we maybe need some dashboard reports. It gets crazy. Instead, now you just kind of run it through. You just write a quick Python script, go hit the thing, and you get this distribution. You can find out that, hey, you know what? There are 100 sites out there that have 81 A's. So somebody out there has actually done that. So the speed at which you can do this is really changing. And as that's happening, we're finding that data is having new ways to impact the business, in particular about all of that aspect of how do you iterate, how do you acquire data, how do you navigate the competitive landscape, how do you do all those things. And to that, I think what I'm going to go through next is the functional areas of data science, and what I think of as the number of areas that you can think of where data science has direct impact on organizations. And this is a functional areas, not necessarily the way I'd say to organize a team, and I'll go into that a little bit later. But to kick that off, the first one is this area of decision sciences and business intelligence. And I think there's a traditional way people have thought about business intelligence, and I'd like to add this term decision sciences on top of it. So these are the people that not only understand what the user is doing, how they're using your product, but they are also the guys that help you figure out what are the right metrics. What's the right way to think about this? Should you think about it as a percentage plus a number? Should it be a 30-day number? Should it be a one-day number? All of those aspects. But they're also doing special analysis. These are also the guys doing the A/B testing. The real way I like to think about these guys, these are the guys that are in the room that help you tell, when you get to a fork in the road, should you turn left or should you turn right? And they take data not only from internal sources, but external sources as well, meld those together to give you a better global view or holistic view of what's going on, so you can actually decide to whether turn left or turn right, rather than just purely basing on hypotheses. To give you an example of that, one that's been a little bit in the news today, is Netflix. When you go to Netflix, what's the first thing they ask you to do? You start adding movies into this instant queue. You start adding them and adding and adding them. Why? Well, they know there's a magic number in there, that if you add a certain amount, the probability that you're going to be a long-time subscriber changes. Now, how do you figure that out? It sort of seems easy now. You say, oh, well, you just look for that magic number. But that's correlation. That's not causation. What they've done instead is they've had all these variables that they say, oh, well, this is what looks like a really interesting way to think about this. And they've got a fantastic analysis team there where they say, we've identified all these variables that look like they are responsible for dealing with churn. But what we can do with that is now we can start A/B testing. We can test our flow to decide which of these variables really work. And through that process, you realize, hey, there is this magic number out there for the number of movies that need to be put in that queue. But you can't just decide to stay with that for one period of time, because that number may be changing over time as the penetration of your market changes. It may change as you go into different countries, all of those different things. And then if you're trying to think of which country to go into next, who are the people that you should be turning to get part of that analysis? It's the decision scientists. So the second area, which I won't go into too much, is one of the ones I think that is often overlooked, is in the fraud, abuse, security, risk area. Who better than to think about the ways to actually separate the signal from the noise? It's data guys, the guys that sniff out things. Both at times at PayPal, national security areas, as well as LinkedIn, always my go-to guys have been the data guys, the guys that find clever ways to think about how to take this data, meld it in different ways, and then figure out, aha, now we've got a way to track the bad guys. The third area, data infrastructure, one of the critical areas, because if you don't have good infrastructure, how do you live on top of it? It's like building a crappy house. You don't want to have a crappy house where you want to be in a great environment. So these are the guys that own the data warehouse. They build tooling, because tooling is critical. How easy can you make your data? How easy can you access it? And they move the data distributed systems, or use distributed systems to move the data around. Now, one of the important parts here is what I call the toolbox model. People often ask me, well, which data system do you use? So shouldn't you ask what data systems we use? Why would you just use one? If a plumber shows up to your house, do you want the plumber that shows up with just one wrench or one screwdriver? It's not the plumber I want. I want the guy that has a big, giant toolbox, right? And of course, there's a cost with training and maintenance. But think about if you're trying to really make decisions about your business, why not rely on all the things? So to give you an example of this is just a case study from LinkedIn of all the different technologies that are used at LinkedIn. You'll notice in there, just if you're thinking about databases, you got Aster, Hadoop. There's some fans out there. Hadoop, you've got MySQL. We've also, we had to invent a bunch of technologies. Voldemort, we didn't have a choice. We had to invent it. So why settle for one? And they all have massive beneficial utility for each type of tool that we've had. And there's also a ton in here that we no longer use, that we've stopped using in the past. And you see this in every organization that uses data effectively. You go talk to the guys at Zynga, you guys talk to guys at Facebook, you guys talk to guys at Amazon. Everyone is using a collection of technologies. So going on, the fourth area now, product and marketing analytics. And I think this is one of the areas that's dear to my heart because of particularly being on the product side of things and all the impact that product can really do. The first one is what I call facilitating the user experience and value proposition. Most times people tell me, well, what's data supposed to do? Well, what's the first thing that happens on the site? If you're in a web property in particular, you're battling that natural instinct to click. Just click out the window, just turn it off. Go check your email, go check Twitter, go check Facebook. You're battling that thing of the next thing to do. So how do you change that? How do you get someone to understand it? Just as two examples, one on the left is a functionality from that you'll see on LinkedIn or Facebook, which is people you may know. The right is an example of a game, Cityville from Zynga. When you get to any of these social networks, what's the first thing that you need to know? Are there people here that I actually know? How uncomfortable is it when you first walk into a conference for the very first time? What's the first thing that you do? You do this outer circle where you walk clockwise or counterclockwise, see if there's somebody you know. When you go get a drink, try to see if there's somebody there. Now imagine if the lights were off. Right? Now you can't even see. So the value proposition of going there, you say, well, you could search for people. That's kind of a crappy one. So shouldn't the system be able to automatically put in front of you those people that are actually there? And all the great people that are using that system. And that is exactly, that facilitates the value proposition right up front. There are a lot of people that you interact with regularly that are on here. In the game space, you've got to battle this thing of like, this game is too hard. Bye, I'm leaving. And so instead, what you need to do is highly optimize that flow for getting people deeper and deeper into this product experience where they are now interacting in novel and different ways. And so to that effect, you have to highly tune and figure out what works. And Zynga is one of those people that have figured that out time and time again. There's also this new model that's showing up, these blogs, these data blogs. So this is one from OkCupid. There's been a number of great ones you can see from LinkedIn or Facebook, and even Uber Cab, now just Uber just did one. And what these are doing is they're showing data in interesting ways. So this one is, OkCupid talks about the mathematics of beauty. Christian has done a phenomenal job with this, where what he did is he looked at these photos, and photos have tags on them. There's metadata about the time when it was actually taken. And so you can actually look on the system of how people rate the attractiveness and see the ratio. Another cool one they did is on what happens when people report on how often they're having sex, and they also know which device they use. So Android versus BlackBerry or iOS. Who has more sex? Now, here's the crazy thing about this if. It's kind of, well, these would be a little bit sort of interesting, kind of gimmicky from a data perspective. But what it turns out is for users that don't use your product, these things get massive media pickup nowadays. You find them on the front of the Wall Street Journal. You find them on Good Morning America. And so you're getting not only free brand advertising, but you're also explaining the value proposition of why this is an interesting product. You can't do that. You can't buy that media time. You can't create a commercial that is going to be that engaging. And the number of users that come back or engage with these sites is very, very high. So going to the second area under product, funneling users into other products and to create dead ends. And one of the great case studies here is Amazon, with people who bought this also bought this, people who viewed this bought this, people who viewed this, people who viewed this bought this and this, and so on, right? Now, think about it. You get to a product page and you go, what's next? Maybe you just disappear. You click off. You disappear off of it. But instead, you've taken a flow that's going to dead end and move them into another product or another page. And so you're getting a chance to win again. The same way that you can also use lightweight recommendation engines to start funneling you into auxiliary products that people may not recognize are in your product portfolio. So examples of that are, in the LinkedIn case, groups you might like, or those other kind of parallel systems. So the next one is targeting users through alternative channels. And here's an example. This is another one from LinkedIn. And this one I highly encourage you is Joe Adler is going to be talking about using new ways to do analytics and marketing. This is an email, and I talked a little bit about this at the previous Strata conference. This is an email campaign that goes out every 6 months now, I believe. And what it says is it says, hey, here are the people that have changed job recently. So what do you think the CTR is in this? I contend this is the highest CTR of any email that doesn't use naked people. Why? Because it's got the pictures of all the people you know. And it's also telling them you haven't been up to date. You haven't kept up with it. And it's got words, and it's got all this powerful incentive to keep you engaged. And the only way to do this is with a rich analytical tier and really being able to get it. And it's the great kind of cool thing is that you can use analytics in fun, creative ways to bring users back as well as continue to explain the value proposition. Of course, finding search recommendations. There at the bottom there you see Google, and there's a type ahead. Obviously done a phenomenal job there. And one of the critical things about that is if your type ahead is not as good as that, that's what the world is expecting now. Full-blown data products. I think there's going to be a whole new range of things. This is another LinkedIn example, just because I think it's one of the great ones, where it melds all different types of data. And there's going to see a whole range of different challenges that come from as people meld data. And the part of the reason is you can't do traditional QA around data. And this is one of the critical roles that your data team needs to think about is your traditional just throw it over the fence to do QA is not going to work. And here's an example. In that upper top there, you can see this is a product that allows you to see different career paths. In the upper there, it started as a student, then you go to flight instructor, then you go to pilot. And what if the next one was said, and then you go back to school? That might feel a little weird. Maybe that's right. Maybe it's just a low probability one. Well, how are you supposed to QA that? Because functionally it's correct. But from a data perspective, it's really not right, or it doesn't feel right. And the only way to start doing these things is by, especially as you start bringing additional data products together, different data streams together, you're going to really kind of get new way, the mess that happens in this as the data comes together requires you to start doing massive eyes on the problem, and through things like Mechanical Turk and many of the things that you heard in the earlier Amazon talk today. So some essential lessons. The first one is, there we go, thank you, setting the user's expectations. So how many people know what is the thing on your left? Yeah, tell me, shout out. The Aibo, it's a little dog, right? How many people know what that is on the other right? Yeah. How many people have, like, so the Aibo is this kind of little dog, it kind of is robot dog. It kind of walks a little bit. If it fell over, what would you do? You pick it up. On the left there's United. When you call United, what's the first thing you do? Agent, operator, representative, human. You just try to get somebody online. Nobody ever comes away from that experience saying, yeah, that feels pretty good. Next time, same time tomorrow? Never once. So why the difference between the dog versus United? Very sophisticated technology, yet one works really well, the other is terrible. What's going on? Well, in the case of the Aibo, you're setting the expectation. It's a dog. No one don't sit there and kick the dog. That doesn't happen. People always say, oh, the dog fell over, it did something stupid. It's a little cute dog. Put it back upright. There's no way to do that with an IVR system, or at least one that I've seen. Right? The people try to measure the intensity of the profanity and then try to decide which way to route you instead. But that's the point. The expectation is critical. One of the teams that I think that does this the best is Pandora, the music service. You say thumbs up or thumbs down. If you say thumbs down, what does it do? It's like, oh my God, I'll never do that again. So sorry, so sorry. Right? It's a little dog. You say thumbs up, it's like, yay, super good, super good. That's the point, is setting expectations are critical, especially as you build data products. The next one, precision and recall ratios are flipped when you expose data to a user. And this will be something that you're going to hear a lot more of in the Strata talks to come. But when you start putting a data product out in front of people and trying to really use it, it's a place where if you're behind an ad, people are okay with a crappy ad. They're used to ignore it. But if you give them a recommendation for a product, like say in the case of scooters, and then suddenly you show something really weird, then it feels really odd. And so how do you protect yourself against this? And I think this is one of the classic, or is becoming one of the really important features of data teams, which is, the first is, most data teams, when they come up with an idea, the other team says, great, we'll take it from here. But what they don't realize is all of the gotchas when building a data product. Like the data guy will say, well, what happens when we start running out of data in a collaborative filter and the distribution starts to really tail off? What are we going to do? The other guys would just code it up and say, yay, we're done. So there's no self-defenses. There's no graceful fallout when working with data. And how critical that is to have mechanisms that when the product can't give good data, you have a way of safeguarding. And that kind of goes back to that setting expectations. The setting expectations is also a way of safeguarding. So going on from that, let's talk about building the team. And first, a question of how much demand is there for data scientists. So here's the good news. The great news. This is a plot of demand of data scientists, courtesy of LinkedIn. On the bottom there is time, and on the left, the axis, vertical axis, you can think of it as a proxy of demand for data. So you see this kind of in the 70s. We got the high stuff from the space race. It kind of levels out, and then we start to take off in 2005. Yay, good stuff for data scientists, right? Oh, it gets better. That's what it looks like today, that steep jump. Data scientists are in more demand than ever, top positions to go after. So everyone should change their title to data scientist and ask for a raise. Now, that said, what do data scientists need more than anything else? There's one complaint that is universal, one complaint. And that common complaint is to be in control of their destiny. When Reed asked me to come in and to start building out the data team at LinkedIn, I went around to every place I could, eBay, Yahoo, Google, Xerox PARC, every place. And I asked all the data guys, like, what's the one thing that's your biggest pain? And they say, well, we come up with this great idea, and I've gone to the product manager or the GM, and they've said, yeah, that's nice, roadmap's full. Come back next week or next month or next quarter. You come back next quarter, and they say, no, it's still full. That happened to anybody here? Yeah, data guys, you can always tell who the data guys are. They're like, yeah, that was yesterday. And that's kind of the thing. How do you find a mechanism to enable data guys to be in control of their destiny, to be able to ship stuff? Just like if you said to an engineer, hey, sorry, you can't ship it. They get pissed. They get frustrated. Same thing is true with data guys. And the number one way to both attract data guys and gals, I'm using guys as meaning both, is giving them the ability to be in control of their destiny. Let them have the ability to make their products real. And let me just say a couple more words about that, which is, what do I mean by that? And one of the things that we did at LinkedIn is we made it a full-blown data team. And I think a full-blown product team where they were able to ship their code directly to the site and put things right up there and get things done. You see guys at Netflix who said, you know what, we're going to come up with really creative solutions, and we're going to create something called the Netflix Prize to go out and figure that out and foster stuff. You see guys at Zyngo who are actually doing really innovative stuff where they're jointly tied to the business, where they're coming up with new models to figure out how to increase the game utility. And they're able to actually just work directly without any management layer in between, just work directly with engineers and get stuff out there. So one of the questions I get very often is, well, what is this do-it-yourself guide? If we have to build a data team, how am I supposed to do it? What's your advice? And so this would be my set of things. The first is what to look for in a data scientist. Intense curiosity, a passion for playing with data, a history of having to manipulate and solve a problem. Some of my favorite people in here are people who have come up with a curious insight of their own. They're the guys that are already making those graphs of the con, right? They're the ones that are they're like, hey, you know what? I found a data set and I played with it and I came up with something cool. They just iterated on something really novel. So with that, the next one is, what are the key skills? Finding rich data sources, working with large volumes of data, and they don't care about the constraints. They figure out a way to do it. Cleaning the data. It's one of the, if anything, one thing I'd leave you with is oftentimes we're so focused on just putting something out there and doing something important with data. The cleaning of data is the problem. You can't go on if you haven't cleaned the data. And finding people that understand that and are able to recognize that is an absolute necessary checkbox. These guys also need to know how to meld multiple data sets together, visualize the data to understand it, and then building rich tooling that helps them get better and better with it. And so one of the classic places that I like to look for these guys is from the physical sciences. So people that are in meteorology, astrophysics, oceanography, these guys, they have to take all this massive, dirty data, they have to merge it with other data sets, they do all this stuff, and then finally they get a small data set that they can use to actually answer a problem. So they're doing all this massive heavy lifting to finally get to start on the problem. And that's kind of the way you want to think about the key skills that you're looking for. Those kind of guys, the guys that are clever, just having a whole slew of just going after things with machine learning problems and AI, that's important. That's absolutely important. I don't want to take that away from that. But you also have to have this ability to be clever, because all the AI and all those other things come after you've been able to clean the data and munge all through all this stuff. So where do you look for them? Number one place, you probably already have them inside your organization. Most places already have them. They're just kind of like under the cover data people. And they've never been given the chance, or they've been burned. They've tried to say, hey, we should do something like this. And they said, well, no one's going to listen to me. I better go back to what I usually do. And of course, in fact, when I go to most organizations and they say, well, we don't have any data guys, and I said, well, I had lunch with your guys, and it sounded like you have 3 or 4 already here. They just haven't been allocated or given the shot at doing so. Interns. I can't emphasize enough how important it is. If that graph continues to grow the way it is, and I believe it absolutely will for quite the foreseeable future, with the demand of data scientists, the only way you're going to be able to do it is to build them. The best way to build them, start with interns. It's a phenomenal way to get people to get exposure. You're helping also inform their class choices. You're giving them exposure to your problems that then translate into how they're going to work down the line and also give you the ability to try before you buy. Look in fields where people aren't aware where their skills, it's not obvious that their skills are going to translate. And so for that purposes, that's why I always like to hire out of these other esoteric areas. One of the guys I hired was a neurosurgeon. Turns out he hates surgery. But awesome, unbelievable ability and skills to analyze data. In fact, if you just do a LinkedIn search of all kind of people that have the term data scientist, and you start looking at their past history of where they go, you kind of go, wow, these guys have had serious career shifts. Well, they have serious identity crises, one way or the other. But maybe that's a whole other aspect, that's a whole other session. But the whole thing of them being able to translate their skills in useful ways is a great way to bring in new talent and new thinking inside your organization. And of course, building strong relationships with your academic counterparts, because there's always great new things coming out, and how do you leverage them? So, finally, my principles for talent. And this is the way I like to think about what is really important for getting a team energized about data science. And so the first one is, the first criteria, would we be willing to do a startup with you? Why is that? That's sort of a flippant answer to say, look, we need to kind of race real fast here. We're going to be working on hard problems, and we need to be able to handle the no-look passes with each other. It's also about trust and the ability to communicate. And if you can answer all the things that you would trust this person to be a startup with you, that's a good criteria for the person being on your team. 2, can you knock the socks off of the organization in 90 days? Well, the organization is always getting bigger. So how do you continually impress them? Why is that important? The first is a commitment to the new employee that we are going to absolutely find a way to get you up to speed very quickly. 2, flexibility to work on interesting problems. You know, at least in the case of LinkedIn and PayPal, all the people that we onboarded as data scientists came up with a phenomenal set of products. Career Explorer, all the blog posts, many of the blog posts, a whole bunch of rich tooling. All of these things, the talent match, the job matching engines, a lot of the fraud techniques, all these ideas came out of people's first 90 days because they're looking at the problem fresh. And they said, hey, shouldn't the system or product do this? This seems stupid. I said, that's a great problem. Then what happens is, in that, after they've knocked the socks off the company, well, anytime they go into a meeting, they have clout. People go, oh yeah, that's the guy that did that. Yeah, we want that person in here. We want this person in these meetings. So now you've set the tone and the bar for them in the organization to be able to be more efficient and more effective. The third, will you be doing something amazing? Our definition, at least my definition, has always been both by the PayPal Mafia and now the LinkedIn Mafia. We expect you to be doing that amazing. Why? Why is that so critical? It's a handshake. It's absolutely a handshake for your future. You cannot be amazing if the organization is not going to put you in position to do so, internally, externally, on projects you're going to work on. And you can't be amazing if you don't make the company amazing, because that's the platform on which you jumped from. So that handshake is really a critical thing. Now, why is all these kind of 3 things together so valuable? The big reason it's so valuable is you are now creating a forum and a place where people not only are creative, and creative is fostered, but it is actually made into reality. You're now allowing them to actually setting an expectation that they should be doing this, that they should not be putting artificial leashes on top of them. When I talk to organizations and they say, oh, well, we're data guys, we can't do this, I say, they always kind of like these fake answers. And they're kind of these, and if you think about a lot of the conversations you have internally, you're like, guys, why are you putting artificial leashes and collars on yourself? Why aren't you just going out there and getting stuff done and making stuff happen? And that's part of this expectation, is trying to prevent people from putting those artificial handcuffs or leashes, or your favorite analogy, on there and trying to get them to go. And what we found is, once you do that, the data scientist, more than any other role, has proven to be give bigger bang for their buck. They find unique ways to add value. It's not just in the straight product development. It's not just straight in marketing. It can be in HR, like we saw earlier. It can be in other areas thinking about, hey, efficiencies of how the servers go. It could be thinking about, hey, what's the right way to think about lunch? And I've seen great stuff where people have said, hey, you know what? Seems like we have a lot of leftover food. Shouldn't there be a smarter way to actually think about how we order food? It's a great problem. It's one that should be solved. It's a great one for data guys to get their hands on. And so all those things, in conclusion, really leads to this area of organizational structure. And I caution you, there's frustration ahead. And the reason for that is this is an incredibly, incredibly hard problem. And so some lessons learned about this is people that work together should be close together. Data is incredibly messy, and working on somebody else's data or when you meld data together, it's always a dirty prospect. And so very often you need two eyes on a problem, and especially if you're working, those who work with any schemas that are complex know that, oh, wow, gee, I spent the last 5 days doing this, and that turned out I was using the wrong column because that was outdated, right? Or, oh, gee, I forgot, I got to separate this out because it's some bogus thing. So getting people together is close. Train people to fish. There's a new model of democratization data. I think Facebook has done one of the most impressive parts about this, where pretty much anybody can write a Hive query and get data. It clears a tremendous amount off your plate. And the more people that are interacting and accessing data makes the whole organization better overall. Because now everyone is living with your problem. You're no longer a gatekeeper. And people often say, but the metrics are going to be kind of, who knows how these people are going to create a metric? Fine. Let them create their own metrics. Over time, though, they're going to want additional sophistication. When that sophistication happens, who are they going to turn to? They need to turn to you. In fact, that's almost always what happens. They go, great, we did all this stuff. And then they want to say, hey, check it out. Look at what I did. And what happens most of the time, the data guys say, who let you have access to that data? No, it's the wrong way. You say, great, that's awesome. You don't tell your kids, like, hey, look, I made this new drawing. And you're like, that looks like crap. How come the hands are so big and the head is so small? No one does that. You say, great, try again. Great, let's work on it together. Have that same attitude with the organization. Make them grow up with the data. And don't make it all better all around. You know, all these functional areas I talked about, no matter how you organize, they need to stay in regular contact. Data is still an art, and being clever helps everybody in the sense of sharing how they did it. Get people to share. Let them learn the tricks. Finally, invest in your people, your process, your tooling, your infrastructure. Infrastructure twice there. See how important it is? But people, starts with people first. Can't do anything without people, and all the rest are the things that enable the people to be successful. So finally, at the end, there's no right model. You go to Zynga, it's very different than how you do it at LinkedIn. It's very different from how you do it at Google. It's very different how you do it from Facebook. And every one of those places is changed massively over time. Same is true if you talk to anybody in the financial sector about how they've done it over time, how they structure their teams. And so what you have to realize is that that model has to be flexible, and you're going to have to figure out what's the right way to work inside your organization. So with that, that is a little bit of building about data science teams. So I'll take any questions that people have.
So DJ, how long until you think that the data analyst, the sort of embedded data analyst, is a normal part of every division of a business?
I think there are certain industries where it's already happened. It's expected that there's a data scientist with any of their organizations. Particularly what happens as people train or take their first few jobs as a product manager or a web dev or an engineer in some of these organizations that are very data-driven, and they have an expectation of turning to this data guy for help. They've now recognized that, hey, I've got this new organization, why don't I have this guy? And they articulate, and so they spread the gospel almost inside these new organizations, new industries. What's been amazing is if you look at that chart of the data science, the demand for that, I think it's showing that it's only accelerating. And I wouldn't be surprised if we see some massive change in the last 3 years. The term data scientist, as it's being used, is really only about 3 years old, or at least the current reinvention of it. And so if that's the case in 3 years, and we're seeing, Strata is a great example of this, of how much demand there is, I can't even imagine how much progress we're going to see in the next 3 years.
All right. Can we have the house lights up here in case there's any questions? All right, you got one right here in the front.
Yeah.
It seems like demand is starting to exceed supply. How do you get people, data scientists, in your interview room to begin with?
Yeah. So the question is, economics, supply and demand. So if the demand is exceeding the supply, what do? How do you get these guys in there? Well, one, you can poach, and you can pay in an arm and a leg, and maybe 2 arms and 2 legs to hire them these days. Because the demand is so high, the price point for data scientists has gone way up. So the way that I think about it, and it's certainly in the case that was true at LinkedIn, is you can't hire them. You just have to build them. And what does it mean to build them is finding these guys in these diamonds in the rough from these different industries and really looking for those key criteria that make a data scientist, that curiosity, that intense curiosity, that drive to figure out what's really going on, all of those different aspects, and then making them data scientists by giving them the flexibility, the training, the partnership, all those things. The interns are phenomenal. Some of my best data scientists I've ever worked with come out of interns. And fostering that. Yes? What was the presentation software? This is Prezi, so Prezi gets a free plug there.
You know, it's the hipster of presentation software.
That's right. And if you didn't get motion sick, we should have warned you there's motion sickness bags under your seats.
That's right. All right, DJ, thank you as always. Great job.
All right, thank you.